I'm a series author. My Torth series is just about 1,000,000 words, and it's in 6 books, originally 7. So that's a completed series. And not only do I write series, I also love to read them. According to my Goodreads, where I track these things, I've read about 284 series so far, and that's not including ones I've forgotten in childhood and that sort of thing. However, of all those series, only 54 of them had endings that I read to or that I got to. So that kind of tells you something. A lot of series authors have, let's say, not great track records, and I'm going to make the argument that it isn't entirely their fault. I think industry pressures really contribute to the reason why so many authors start series and then don't finish them, and I'm going to go over that. So there's some big names that everyone's heard of, most likely. There's George R. R. Martin, who wrote the A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones series. There is Robert Jordan, who unfortunately died before he could finish his Wheel of Time series, and it was then finished by Brandon Sanderson. There's Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote The Name of the Wind and its sequel, and of course he promised a trilogy or a series, and he has not delivered on that yet. Those are some big names, but beyond the mainstream, there's also quite a few indie authors and other smaller name series authors who also either died before finishing or are writing ongoing series and so forth. So some of the big name indie ones are The Wandering Inn, which has something like 14 million words out now, and people don't know whether it's a male or female or a team of writers. Nobody really knows who Pyrodaba is. But that series has been ongoing for quite a while. There's He Who Fights with Monsters, Defiance of the Fall, Primal Hunter. These are all some major lit RPG series. Dungeon Crawler Carl, which has become a mainstream bestseller. That's another ongoing one. And then I'll bookend this with a few mentions of other mainstream hit series that did have endings and yet got a huge outcry from angry fans who thought that the endings weren't all that great. One of those would be the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I'd say fans were kind of split on the ending of that. There was the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. I'm a critic of the way that one ended. And The Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett is another one that had a lot of criticism on the ending. And I could go on. The Farseer series by Robin Hobb. Some series kind of petered out or maybe ended, maybe didn't. You know, there's like the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles series. There's Wool by Hugh Howey, and I could name a few more that had inconclusive endings. So you might ask, what is up with all these series that have inconclusive or unfinished endings? Like, why can't everyone just write The Lord of the Rings, where it has a nice arc and ends? And there are a few of those as well. Like, I could name Mother of Learning, The Perfect Run, Mage Errant. Those are some in the progression fantasy space that did have, in my opinion, pretty decent endings. My own series, of course. Otherland by Tad Williams, and I could name a few more. A lot of fans will accuse authors of turning it into a cash grab where they're just milking it and drawing it out. I honestly don't think that is the motive for most of these unfinished series. I think that there's a lot more to it behind the scenes. Industry pressures are huge, and I don't just mean readers begging for the next book. You know, there's also publishers wanting to have the authors meet deadlines, and there have been increasing pressures in the industry for rapid release because the faster books get released, the more often they show up on the hot new releases categories on Amazon and so forth. So I think when Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings, that was before Amazon existed. It was really before the internet existed. And he took a leisurely 20 plus years to sit around inventing lore, inventing a language. These days, I think that very few authors have that luxury. Maybe back then, not a whole lot of authors had that luxury either. Speaking as someone who did write a lot of lore for my own series and invented a language and so forth, I think there's a lot to be said for world building. World building is a lot of fun. And I did spend years doing that, and I'm proud of what it is. But are the incentives there? Is there a return on investment for something like that? Well, you could argue that when you spend 10 or 20 or 30 years on your own massive magnum opus project, the return on investment is almost never going to be there unless you have the lucky break that, Tolkien posthumously had, so forth. Maybe I'll get lucky posthumously, who knows. but very, very few authors get the kind of break that made all that effort worthwhile. And other authors are watching and seeing how to go for that person that spent 20 or 30 years on their project. Well, they're working at Walmart as a greeter right now, and they don't look like they're having a good time. And they made a few sales, but it wasn't really enough to sustain a career. And so, do I want to spend 20 or 30 years building a solid world with tons of lore? Do I want to think through every angle and rewrite each book and retcon everything to make sure that it all fits together perfectly, like a jigsaw puzzle that's just perfectly made? That is some effort. And a lot of authors are looking at the equation and saying, ooh, no. And even me, I'd say it was a lot of fun and I'm proud of what it is. But I think this, for me at least, this was a once-in-a-lifetime project. I would not do this again. Now, I'm having fun writing my new series, don't get me wrong. And I am doing a lot of world building for it, and maybe it'll blow up into something that big again. But I would not intentionally spend 20 years of my life building an awesome, amazing, epic world with, crazy interlocked ideas and all that. That is some effort to go to. You can see with, Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones, those authors probably started out with the intention of building something with that, at that level, with that level of intricacy. And I believe that at some point they got lost in the weeds. Sort of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa or House of Cards. They're building a foundation, they have a good layer, they build another layer and another, and at some point, maybe on book 3 or 4 or 5, that story begins to veer off course from their original vision of it. But since the earlier books are published, they can't go back and course correct. So now they end up kind of overcorrecting maybe in another direction. And then they overcorrect a little bit more. And at some point they realize, okay, I was aiming this way and now it went this way. And so now they have to try to retcon, and they can't. The earlier books were published. You can't take that back. They already have fans, and that's it. They're locked into the story that they have told, not the story they wanted to tell. And I truly believe that is what's happening with a lot of these authors. In the amateur trenches where authors first get their feet under them, even they're kind of casual dabblers in storytelling. To make a big epic series, that is a huge commitment. When they start encountering setbacks, and there always are setbacks, a lot of people quit at that point. And so even in the amateur arena, big, giant, epic stories with multiple volumes tend to not be finished. There's just so little reward. A lot of writers who are, starting out or dabbling, they get more reward for finishing the next installment of the story than they do for bringing it to a huge end. It's just a long stretch goal that very few authors make. Now, I do think that there's kind of a little bit of a shortcut in that I have seen a few times. I saw it with Superpowers, with Harry Potter. Dungeon Crawler Carl, I see the structure there, so I don't know if Matt Denman will finish that series or not, but what I'm talking about is kind of a blend between an epic structure and an episodic structure. For instance, in Harry Potter and in Superpowers, each book was a school year. So there's they start the school year, they have a Christmas break, and then the school year ends, and then the next book is the next year of the school. And so there's kind of a very loose structure that the author is following, and I think it gives just enough structure to the overall arc that there's kind of an end goal in sight that the author is able to meet. It's like climbing a ladder. It's like building a framework instead of a house of cards. They built the framework first and then they're filling it in. Now, why did I finish my series? Partly because I'm crazy. I serialized my series for an online audience, which allowed me to go back and retcon the earlier books. It did veer off course, like I'm describing, quite a lot. I rewrote the first 2 books entirely from scratch, from the ground up. And I did that twice for the first book, and I won't even tell you how many times I rewrote the beginning of that first book. Overall, I was able to retcon a lot of things. This series that I'm talking about, it has super geniuses, oracles, prophets, and they all seem very prescient because as the author, I was able to go back and retcon everything to fit exactly what I was aiming for. So I'm proud of all of that. Like I said, would I do it again? That's crazy. And personally, as a reader, I'm never going to gripe about other authors not finishing their series, because with 11,000 books published per day on Amazon, there's no shortage of series to discover. and I am still finding gems out there. Sure, I will look for the next Game of Thrones book. I will enjoy it when it comes out, if it comes out. But in the meantime, I just enjoyed the Alex Verus series by Benedict Jacka, and I have about like 20 more series in my queue of things to read that I'm looking forward to, so there's no shortage. Lastly, it's a wonderful industry. I absolutely love it. I love finding new series to read. And series are not for everyone. There's people out there that don't enjoy reading books at all. There's people that will only watch TV series. There's people that only read short fiction or literary fiction, poems, and so forth. So it's really just the people that love big series. It is kind of a niche. It's a niche audience. And I do think anyone getting into this field has to realize that and embrace that. Lastly, if you do happen to write epic series, I run a Discord and a Facebook group for epic series writers, and that's in the notes, and look forward to seeing you.